Well, I think like there's hopefully less corruption in a nonprofit
Okay.
than like certain government entities in different parts of the world.
Yeah.
And so I think basically like the mission driven piece is significant, that it's not about folks trying to profit in like a traditional company or business model, but like raising money to put back into the communities. And hopefully that's like really driven by the communities and informed by what those folks need.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It was Cardva a non-profit also? And
Yes,
then
and Saving Grace. Yep.
Okay.
So I've only worked for nonprofits.
I could tell.
Yeah, I don't know what it's like to work at a corporation.
Yeah. So the company I'm with now, it's a smaller company. It's a family-owned company, probably like 50 to 60 people, span across the country. So that's been great. But then when comparing that experience to even a company, my previous company I was working for, that was like 100 to like 150. That alone, that small number of like additional 100 people, just felt a little more unconnected to each other. If that makes sense. Where it's like, I can try and talk to someone that's like in the warehouse when I'm at the front desk, and unfortunately I can't talk long with them, but it's like there's so much more that they're experiencing in daily life that people in the actual office, they don't. So when I left there to go to my current job, I was like, I like how everyone is so like tight knit, and that's kind of what I felt like. I mean, I've never worked for a nonprofit, but I feel like that's more what the nonprofit world is like. They're a little more tight knit. They're a little more like, family oriented or family themed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I think that goes back to like everyone's here for the same reason. And there are a lot of difficult things that come with working for any nonprofit. But if everyone's like willing to show up and work through those things in order to do the work, it probably highlights a lot of similarities and values and things like that.
Yeah.
And so it does make it a little easier, even if like there are folks that are harder to work with, to be like, and in the end, we're all here for the same reasons.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I love Nike. I'm wearing Nike, but when I worked for them, it was not my funnest time. So glad you are still, you're making a difference in the different kinds of organizations.
Thank you.
So, and then you come back. What was it like to have a year off of thinking of, any kind of work related to domestic violence?
It was great. It was good to get a break. And then also, those unfortunately domestic violence is present all over the world and in all types of communities. And so it was also hard to work with kids knowing like things were happening at home. And yeah, I think it was really good for my mental health to get away from that. But it also meant that I was kind of like refreshed and able to re-engage when I got to Bend and the opportunity came up.
That's true. Okay. Oh, so this was in between Corvallis and Bend. You guys did that year, right?
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Plus, you got some sun.
Yeah, exactly. That helped a lot.
That's got to be a game changer there.
Oh, yeah. Give me that vitamin D.
And then something, again, kind of talking about your time in that part of the world, teaching in Peru.
Oh, yeah.
What was that like?
So I was 19. I did a gap year after high school.
Okay. So this is way before David.
Yes. Yeah. One of my goals with my gap year was to see if social work is what I really wanted to study. I had kind of been drawn to that, and I'd always worked with kids and like provided childcare throughout high school. And so that was my first kind of like foray into actual social services. And so that and one other nonprofit kind of like program is what I signed up for. And so I lived in Peru for 3 months in Lima. And then the program where I was staying had a bunch of volunteers living in a house together, and then they would assign us different kind of like work sites. And a lot of folks would come for a week or two. And I was committed to really making sure that this is what I wanted to do. So I stayed in that program for 3 months. And so I worked in a preschool, I think, in a community that was built like outside the city. Nothing is like official, like they have to run power lines from other sources. It was only like dirt and sand, like nothing was paved. Yeah. And so that was like probably the first experience of true poverty that I had, and also getting to really be part of the community. was a huge part of like my exposure to that, around how people support each other, how the community comes together even when there are not a lot of financial resources, and then how does educating kids fit into that as like a big priority of the community, and folks helping each other out. So it was a really cool experience.
Okay. Now, was that probably where you got to fully practice your Spanish in its entirety versus just like here or there back in Washington?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, that whole year off I spent in Latin America, and so especially being on my own and being forced to interact with people, if I, needed anything to buy lunch, walk down the street, make a hotel reservation, anything like that was in Spanish. So that was kind of when I got really solid.
Do you experience like at that age? I'm when I talked last time with my last guest, I mentioned that when we were younger, he was my age, but when we were younger, we didn't know what the things we're feeling had definitions. It's like, oh, I'm terrified at this thought. I was like, oh, that's what anxiety is. I didn't know that. Or it's like, oh, I'm very sad all the time. That's depression. Oh, I didn't know that. Did you, I guess, looking back at the experience of teaching and this first time you're submerged for a year, how much anxiety did you feel just trying to make sure that, David wasn't there to help, correct anything, but you kind of had to fend for yourself in terms of, the language. Were you experiencing any anxiety at that point now that you can know what the definitions are and how to apply them, or are you just like happy-go-lucky?
Yeah, I did not experience anxiety around language. I think because like I didn't know enough to feel anxious. Like I was like, I'll just do my best. And, there was a little bit of charades and like fumbling through things, but I really wanted to learn and wanted to see how different people live in other parts of the world. And so I don't remember having that sense of pride or like fear of how people would see me. Like I was like, yeah, I'm obviously a gringa, just doing my best, and I was happy, like thankful for that. And I would have a lot of conversations with like the folks who worked at the different programs, the Peruvian staff, and I would just kind of like fumble my way through. But I found that being able to have a conversation with someone, even if it wasn't perfect, was so gratifying that was really motivating to keep trying, even if I'm not always understood.